The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the individual co-host and do not reflect the official policy or position of the Firearms Radio Network and or their employers. Viewer discretion is advised. This is especially true on our live shows.
Broadcast for shooters, hunters, and gun enthusiasts. This is the Firearms Radio Network. The bandwidth for this episode of This Week in Guns is sponsored by Patriot Patch Company. PatriotPatch.co.
Welcome to This Week in Guns. This show is brought to you by the Firearms Radio Network and Patriot Patch Company.
And this show offers commentary on the latest firearms industry news, information, and buzz. I'm your host, Sean Heron, and I get to introduce our panelists tonight. First up, we have historical firearms researcher and host of Sea and Arsenal's Primer Small Arms of World War I series, Matthias McCarty. Welcome back.
Hey, what's up, buddy?
Good to see you, man. Next up, we've got co-founder and VP of Hold My Guns, mental health advocate, Beyond the Unknown on Instagram, and you may have seen her a little bit around the Gun Collective. Genevieve Jones, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Glad to have both you guys here. Before we get started, I want to talk about Patriot Patch Company. Go to patriotpatch.co and check out their Patch of the Month Club. One of my favorite things, I just got a big batch of Christmas patches in, which was pretty cool. I celebrated, hung up on the patch wall, drank some spiked eggnog, and then passed it on the floor. But that last part isn't really associated with Patriot Patch Company. And also check out Second Call Defense, firearmsradio.tv/SCD. We talk about a lot of self-defense shootings on this show and about kind of people's lives being ruined. So go check them out and see if they have a plan that fits your lifestyle. Getting right into it, November sets new records for NICS checks, which is the federal background checks through the FBI. Excuse me. And let's see, it was numbers for November 2019 are a new record, 2,574,752. The previous record was in November of 2016, just a little bit less, which is pretty great. And it looks like 2019 is going to be a record-breaking year in general. December NICS checks last year were 2,543,000. And then it looks like we're going to be... let's see. Total NICS checks for December 2016 was the previous record holder. That's 3,314,594. And it looks like we're probably going to beat that this year. It's kind of crazy. 2016, 2019 are definitely different years. I feel like we do talk about kind of NICS checks a lot on this show and kind of what those numbers mean. And I do believe these are unadjusted, meaning that some of the states that do background checks and things like that, they are not removed from this, but it's a lot of NICS checks. Matthias, what do you think?
Trying to get a reason for the NICS checks overall number is a little tricky because you're going to have some political fears going into it because, again, we're moving towards an election cycle that people, especially with the media the way it is, every time it looks like it's going to swing blue, sales go up. But since there's not an actual panic right now, what we're probably looking at is a combination of an expanding gun ownership, a little bit of political fear, and a fair bit and a significant bit of economic stability. People are willing to buy and try. You're seeing a lot of guns in the market that are not really dedicated to a specific refined function. You're getting a lot of people trying out new and weird concepts. Like anytime you end up in a Kel-Tec market, it means that people are very confident about their ability to purchase and play and not ruin their bank accounts. And so I think it's just a good combination overall. Whatever the factor may be, I think we're just looking for a happy Christmas. And it feels really good to hear these numbers.
Genevieve?
I'm pretty excited to see what they're going to be after December is finished as well, because I think people buy a lot of things in the month of December. At least that's what I had seen from working in gun stores. I mean, anytime that the numbers are up, I think it's awesome because that means that there are either new gun owners or people owning more guns, and I'm all for that. So,
yeah, I totally agree. And I blew the numbers a little bit earlier, but the current record was set in 2016. Overall, the entire year was just a little over 27 million background checks, and that was an election year. And it looks like we're going to break that record. We only needed in December 2.1 million to beat that. And I mean, if trends follow, we're going to be well over that. So it's going to be probably the biggest year for gun sales and background checks that we have seen, which I think is positive news all around.
Yeah. I'm hoping a lot of these are going out as gifts too, because that means you're probably going to spawn more, responsible gun owners out there because you're looking at family connections and things like that too.
Yeah. Absolutely agree. I was actually at a big chain, Sportsman's Warehouse last night, and wanting to buy a gun because they actually had a sale where the gun was actually cheaper than my dealer prices, and I thought that was kind of interesting. And they mentioned something about a gift, and they mentioned family, and they're just spreading misinformation all over the universe. I mean, so people like Sportsman's Warehouse are probably pushing people away from buying firearms as gifts because of their misinformation.
Wait, are they trying to say it was a straw man purchase or something like that?
Yeah, absolutely. They said that you can't do that because it's a straw purchase. And I said, well, that's not necessarily true as long as it's a bona fide gift. And they said, yeah, but only for family. And I was like, well, that's not true either.
No.
I showed him the ATF and the manager just didn't care. And it's whatever.
CYA is going to be the death of liberty more so than anything else. And this is unrelated to this show, but I've actually talked to some people that are, in the sort of legal Second Amendment protection field, and they get upset because you'll see forums and things going nuts about new imports or new sales. That technically that's illegal. We should tell them it's illegal. And it's like, it's not. A lot of what the ATF does is not actually written down legislatively. It's policy. And the more you buy into that policy, the more solid it becomes as almost like case law. And again, I'm talking out my butt because I'm not, a legal authority. But the point being is sometimes believing is making the truth. And you've got to be much more like as an individual, you should definitely lean much more towards the liberty side of the coin whenever you come up against these things, because the more you self-regulate, the more you invite regulation.
Yeah. And I will also say that Ryan Klickner on the Trigger Words podcast on the Firearms Radio Network, he is a legal expert, and he says that, probably it's safest not to buy firearms as gifts and to instead give gift certificates to firearms stores and things like that, which, I mean, that is smart, but it's not against the law. And to tell people that it is dishonest, pretty much, probably at worst. Next story.
Who wants the gift card when they could have the actual thing?
I know. I'm like just go read it. It's like it's
Depends
easy.
who's trying to buy it for me, I think.
Right.
Well,
Exactly.
That's true. If you're about to have a bunch of garbage in your stocking.
If anyone out there wants to buy me a gift, I wear a size 50 BMG.
I'm stealing that.
Woman who told Beto hell no is running for Congress. Her name is Lauren Boebert. And she's here in Colorado, actually. She's a conservative Republican, successful small business owner, mother of 4 boys, and Second Amendment advocate. There is a restaurant here that you guys have probably heard of here in Colorado. It's in Rifle, Colorado. It's called the Shooter's Grill, and all the wait staff and everything else wears firearms, open carry firearms when they're serving. And it's been in the news 100 times. When Beto was at a thing here in Colorado, she was like, hell no, you're not taking our guns. And she got a little bit of notoriety from that. I don't know much about her. I honestly, I should be going there. It's only, I think, an hour and a half from where I'm sitting right now. I should probably go there and kind of check it out and hang out. But
you should do a show from there.
I should. That's actually a really good idea.
Yeah,
that would be a lot of fun. But now she's running for public office. Genevieve, what are your thoughts here?
I think it's interesting. I had never heard of her restaurant before the whole hell no, you're not taking my AR-15 thing. I'm behind her on that. I think it's awesome. It would be really great to have a, strong woman who is also a Second Amendment advocate and, on, in my opinion, the right side of the argument, defending everybody in Colorado. So I think it would be great. I mean, again, I don't really know a whole lot about her, so whether she's prepared or not to do that, I have no idea, but I guess we'll find out.
Yeah. I do agree with this. I want to hear your take on this.
I'm going to be honest. I don't know enough about her policy or experience, but at the same time, I think a lot of people get nervous about having non-dedicated politicians in politics. And sometimes, actually many times, that's a good thing. If you're making an entire career out of just leading people, sometimes you lose perspective on what it's like to be one of those people. So when I hear it say small business owner who's pro Second Amendment, my hope is that carries on into understanding, a lot of tax issues, a lot of like security issues, not for, the outside world, but for the inside world, like how much people are allowed to know about you, that sort of thing. Like it can get, you can get some good opinions from business owners in politics, but it depends on who they are. And I don't know a lot about her, sadly.
Yeah. I've seen quite a bit and from Colorado. I wouldn't say that I have the most positive impression. A lot of the things that I've heard her say are just kind of regurgitated talking points from conservative viewpoints and not a whole lot of critical thinking or unique and individual thought. That was my impression kind of before this. But at the same time, I'm like, you know what? Like, she is eloquent. Like, she speaks well. It doesn't matter if it's conservative talking points because no one really pays any attention anymore. And as long as they hear what they want to hear in their own echo chamber, they're going to probably vote that way. And she's staunchly Second Amendment. And that, I think, you know, I have really become kind of a one issue voter. So I think at that point, I think it's a great thing. And she's got some notoriety. She's super pretty, which probably shouldn't matter. But I think in some cases it actually does. And, you know,
ever since they started televising this sort of stuff, appearances have become more important.
Mm-hmm.
Politicians have statistically become more attractive ever since TV.
Yeah, 100% agree. So I think she probably has a decent chance. And if you look at Colorado's electoral map, it is very, very, very red with just a few pockets of blue that seem, due to gerrymandering, have kind of taken over our political process here in Colorado. So anyone that we can get in there that is staunchly 2A, I kind of am behind them. And I would vote for her if I was in her voting area for sure.
More so than Republican and Democrat too. I want to point out, when you're talking about politics, it's okay to support either side as long as they support your core values. And so I hope people are understanding that you can be a values voter and not have to have an allegiance to a particular party. So much so that I really wish I had the money and time, because I almost thought about starting yet another political party, but as an addendum, because I feel like if there was a Bill of Rights party, essentially, that just went around and said, hey, Democrat, Republican, everybody who signs up with this agrees that the Bill of Rights is immutable, I feel like you'd get a lot of people joining up, and it might start to build some common ground again, because arguing about how we spend our money and where we spend it and stuff is very different from what we do with our human rights. Can
I join your party, please?
It seems like such a simple concept. Somebody that has more time, by all means, take it. It's a free idea. Because who cares who runs it? If there's a Bill of Rights party that says, look, these 9 things from the Bill of Rights, nobody will agree with the 10th because that's state's power. But at least the first 9, can we all agree with those? And see how many people you can actually get to agree to them, because in that is the second, like we talk about every day.
Yeah. Guys, let's talk about Virginia. So first off, there is a sheriff in Virginia who claims that, if necessary to protect gun rights, he will deputize thousands of residents. And I think that this is actually kind of great. He's the sheriff of Culpeper County, and his name is somewhere not in the first 5 paragraphs of the article. So I'll find it kind of as we go here. But yeah, he has said that he will deputize thousands of his constituents should any bill threaten their constitutional right to own firearms and thereby impact their ability to defend themselves and their loved ones. And for those people that don't know, what happened is after these last elections, Virginia basically turned blue, and immediately their politicians there said that they were going to throw in all kinds of gun control. Genevieve, would you want to be a deputy?
I mean, I would.
I would too.
I would absolutely do it. I think it's awesome. Reading this article, I really I'm very excited that he is doing this, and I wish that more people in more states were doing things like this, because it would be really, really helpful to have, sheriffs who are kind of behind our cause rather than just sitting back and letting it happen. I think it's really awesome. And some of the proposed laws in Virginia and the past laws in Virginia now are really ridiculous. I mean, this whole, having to get a permit before you can purchase a firearm and then having to wait, I think it's like 24 or 48 hours or something. I mean, that could cost people their lives, that waiting period. And I just, it makes me very sad. So it's encouraging to see people standing up and fighting against this and actually doing something about it.
Yeah, I did find his name. It's literally the 3rd line of the article. I just missed it. It's Scott Jenkins. He's the sheriff there. I agree with you, Genevieve. Matthias, what are your thoughts?
First of all, This Week in Guns is now having a contest for you to design the badge that he will be issuing to all of his special deputies. So submit those all to Sean. And then I think we need to start a Kickstarter so that we can buy 3,000 badges, be they 3D printed plastic or whatever, I don't care. But we need to get some Chinese toy style, like cheap badges that we can just send straight to his mailbox so that he just has them ready to go in case he needs them.
I think that's wonderful. That's a fantastic idea.
But Politically, yeah, we've seen the sanctuary city applied for immigration and things like that, and I know people get mad about it. Like it's actually, I know a lot of people are very states-minded that get very mad about the idea that a state would resist the federal government, and because it's an issue that they don't support. But honestly, for me, I rather appreciate that localized governments have more control in the United States. Now, whether it's between a city and the state, that's pretty tricky. We don't see a lot of that. We usually see state versus fed. So this is new ground, and I'm curious to see how it goes by all means. But I think whenever you start to get into the points of people's, liberty, yeah, you're going to meet a lot of resistance, and it's going to be pretty fair on the side of whoever's trying to uphold more liberty.
Yeah. I will say that, so they've been doing a lot of the sanctuary county things in Virginia, and man, there are so many that have signed up. I saw a map today, and it is turning bright green, which means that they are sanctuary counties, and it's getting more green by the day. I think that's pretty interesting. Which brings us to our next story. Virginia County forms a militia to stave off proposed gun control. And this was very interesting to me. It's Tazewell County. They basically formed a militia at a meeting recently. And I thought that this was one of the more interesting things that I've actually seen, because Virginia, don't forget, is actually introducing some legislation that would, or there's already some on the books, but they're clarifying some legislation that would make training, being part of a militia, things like that, much more difficult. And I thought that it was kind of a cool thing that they have now officially formed a militia. Othias, would you be in a militia?
I certainly would. I don't see. So here's the problem. The term militia has been branded because it's mostly been associated with cult-like behavior. But at its heart, the notion of a militia is actually that the people of a certain state or region have taken under their own onus their defense. So, this is more of a threats foreign than it is domestic, because, and again, this is a state versus federal thing. A lot of people tend to think of it as being like, they think of domestic threats when they think of the presidency, but the presidency is supposed to be a thing that's over top of all these states. So even on a state perspective, that would be a foreign threat. But, the idea that you can talk to your neighbors and say, hey, if we have a mass problem of some sort, this is what we have for equipment, this is what we have for availability, this is what we have for armament, and we're going to be organized so that we don't just go out in the front yard and shoot each other in the midst of a panic. That's good. And at its very basics, that would be a militia, is a predetermined plan and a little bit of training with your neighbors to say, hey, if it hits the fan, let's not have that classic Twilight Zone episode where we all turn on each other because the aliens landed. Let's just rally where we're supposed to rally and know who we know and not screw up our own stuff just because we're freaking out. And then you can shoot a threat. That's sort of the second tier. Everybody always thinks of this hate or this attack or whatever else that comes out of the term militia. But no, at its core, it's self-defense applied to a larger group of people.
Yeah. Genevieve?
I agree with everything that you just said. I was going to say something very similar, actually. But I totally agree with you. I think that actually coordinating with people is so incredibly important. And that's the main reason why I would totally be in one. I also think that people just live in these weird clouded bubbles where they think that all of these things that are happening aren't really happening around them. So when stuff does hit the fan, no one's going to be actually prepared to deal with it. So I think that it's a really excellent thing. And I think also it would be really fun to be in a militia, because when I get in arguments with people who are not pro-gun and they start screaming a well-regulated militia in my face, I can be like, well, actually.
Right.
Well, Suze, who works with us over at our organization, she has a normal 9 to 5, and she had someone that was in an argument with her about this sort of things. And they said, well, the Second Amendment's for a militia. And she goes, how the hell am I supposed to start the militia without the guns? So I would have to buy the guns in order to start the militia. So therefore, I still must have an individual mandate to buy those guns, because, how else can I make it? I can't just start one and not have any armament. Oh, look who's shown up.
Jeremy from We Like Shooting is here.
I agree with everything that I just heard in the last 2 minutes.
I also really love your little tag in the bottom of your screen, International Lord of Hate. That's pretty accurate.
That's left over from our job.
It really is. I accidentally put the wrong link in the We Like Shooting private messaging, and Jeremy's here, so we're gonna roll with it.
There went the show.
Yeah.
It'll be fun.
Editor's going to cost you more money now.
Now, guys, we've talked about sanctuary counties. We've talked about the sheriff who's going to deputize Virginia citizens. We've talked about Virginia County forming a militia and being a sanctuary county. Well, now let's talk about the Virginia Attorney General, who insists that pending gun laws will be followed. And he says it in no uncertain terms. The quote is, these laws, I'm going to wag my finger at you guys because I'm pretty sure that's what he did when he said it. These laws, when they get passed, they're going to be followed. And when you look at the resolutions that are being passed, they're really just expressions of opposition to these gun safety measures that Virginians have demanded for a long time. When you talk to those who are in law enforcement and really push them a little bit, like a sheriff or a prosecutor, and say, so really, you mean you're going to allow violent felons to go ahead and purchase firearms? No, they back down pretty quickly. This guy's kind of a douche. And Genevieve, I'll start with you. What do you think? Is he just being full of bluster or what?
I think he's being a politician. I mean, he's reminding me a little bit of Beto right now. But I also think it's really interesting how he's saying that law enforcement's going to back down, but we literally just talked about the sheriff who is, going to deputize citizens and people who are starting organized militias and stuff. So I just think it's interesting that he said that probably just to get points with the anti-gun crowd in Virginia.
I don't think that guy realizes how much power a sheriff has.
Yeah, I don't think he does either. And I'm like, what is the attorney general going to do? Like he's going to send the National Guard to arrest the sheriff? Like, I mean, literally, like I want to know what is his toothless thing that he's going to do? Othais, I mean, is he going to go arrest everybody? Is he going to go take people's guns himself? Like, I don't get it.
Mass non-compliance is at some point a revolution, and it's going to become a fine line the further we get down into this. And people act like we're not. I think I loved it. I can't remember where I was, but someone said that the Second American Civil War is already underway. It's just a Cold War right now. And it may remain cold. We would hope it remains a Cold War. Like we're hoping that what we're doing is we're dealing with a lot of moving politics, and what will happen at the end of it is what happened in the actual Cold War. One of the powers will eventually erode and collapse, and no one will have to fire a shot. That would be ideal. But currently we are at loggerheads. We have a very divided, population, and Virginia is one of the states where it's now intermixed. We have other states. It's happening everywhere. Like I was talking to a friend of mine. They said it's not like the first time around where there were geographic boundaries and governors told you where to go. The fights are between the rural and the sort of more civil, and it's cities versus country. And it's gotten so mixed in together, and people shop at the same places and things like that. It's going to be very difficult, and it's one that we hopefully will resolve without violence. And occasionally there's going to be bad actors, and that's going to have to prove our patience too, because we're all going to have to denounce it for a while and try to sort this out. And this guy is unfortunately right now being one of those bad actors. He's saying that I am going to unilaterally condemn, and I am going to enforce, and I am not going to listen. That's a recipe for breaking down the communication and not helping to diffuse it.
Yeah, so Virginia is going to be a little bit of a mess. We'll kind of see how things go. There was a 2A rally in Richmond, Virginia. The what do they call it? The God Family and Guns rally in Richmond. And Virginia, it's kind of weird. And we're going to talk about another state that you would kind of never expect. But Virginia overnight went insane, and it may be a battleground. House bill proposes to remove SBRs from the NFA list, and I don't know. I don't know how I feel about this one, but the NFA is, it's the thing that says you can't have suppressors and SBRs without paying tax stamps and going through background checks and things like that. But there's a bill called the Home Defense and Competitive Shooting Act. It was introduced to the U.S. House this week by Roger Marshall. He's a Kansas Republican, and he argues that SBRs have been overregulated since 1934, and that needs to change. Jeremy, do you actually think that this is going to pass? I mean, in a House that's democratically controlled,
no, it won't pass at all. But they should introduce that legislation every Congress, every chance they get. Legislation like that should be put in on our side. The HPA, the SHARE Act, the Home Defense Act, and then they need to come up with one for the Hughes Amendment as well.
Jeremy's actually pretty right. It's unusual, but mostly on the sort of conservative side of things, whenever you whenever you submit a bill or something and it fails, they're like, oh, well, we'll come back in like 30 years, if ever, and yet on the other side of the issue, if it fails, they'll bring it back in 3 months. They'll bring it back in a month. They'll bring it back as many times as they need to bring it back. I don't understand why, quote unquote, our side, or rather the gun side of this particular issue, gets lumped in with people that are unwilling to just constantly refile this stuff, to constantly bring it back to light.
Yeah, and we actually talked about this the other night. Jeremy said this, and I was like, I agree. Let's inundate every single time. Let's do what the other side does. Genevieve, what do you think?
I would love it if SBRs are easier to get. I would love it if I didn't have to pay tax stamps to get suppressors or anything like that. All of those regulations are just so ridiculous in my mind. I mean, everybody here, I'm sure, agrees with that. I think what Jeremy brought up is a great point. I don't enjoy the left, and they are still very good at what they do. And I think that we need to do a little bit more of that and be a little bit like them in the persistentness aspect.
I will say it's beautiful poetry, the situation we're in right now. If you think about it, we are sort of in the yin and yang of gun control, which is that by its nature, the NFA is unconstitutional, and yet it has been allowed to exist because it is a tax. It is not a regulation. And yet then, if you follow the history, it's like, well, it was under they were revenuers at first, but then you have to break off the ATF because neither the IRS nor the FBI wants to touch it because it's unconstitutional. So you end up in a situation where short barrel rifles are now illegal because they're not illegal. Like it's one of those things where it's like, no, they're not illegal. You just got to pay the tax. Also, before you can pay the tax, you have to fill this paperwork that requires a background check for the paperwork for the tax. It's this mess, right? And at the same time, I can go over to PSA because I'm in South Carolina, and I can just look at effectively SBRs left and right, but they've got a little piece of rubber on them because it might theoretically get wrapped around my wrist. Because it's not really an SBR, and this isn't really illegal, it's just a tax. Like, we're stuck in this mirror world where it's become so overbuilt and confusing because something is illegal that can't be illegal, and something is perfectly existent that supposedly is illegal that can't be illegal. It's amazing.
Oh, I should be able to go to the post office with $200 cash, hand it to the guy across the counter. He hands me my $200 stamp, and I go home, and I put that on a form, and I now have a legal SBR.
No,
just like a goose stamp, just like a waterfall stamp, or any other tax.
No, you can't do that because one time somebody bought the shittiest gun of World War II and shot a president with it.
I mean, true.
Because if we made him buy a better gun, that would have gone better.
It would have gone the same.
Which president are we talking about? JFK, I'm assuming.
Mm-hmm. That was a lot of the mail order stuff came from that.
And it is literally not even a hard shot.
Yeah.
I can make that drunk on 2 hours of sleep.
I don't know this is the thing you want to brag about right now.
That's true.
I'm just saying, when we were in Dallas, we literally went there, and I went, oh, he's even driving right at you. That's not even a hard shot.
Yeah, I don't think it would have been better or worse, honestly. Like, it would have been the same.
Right. It's another one of those things that we've lived with for many decades that had no bearing on what actually happened.
Yeah.
Who was talking about it the one day? Was it on the show, or was it? I don't remember if it was on the show or at my shop. But we were talking about every law. Every law should have a sunset built into it automatically.
That would be me, and then I spread that to Eric, so he's been running with that too. And I've heard a few other people say it too along the way. But I've definitely been saying that every single law in the United States. Well, only because it's interesting, but the sort of, I'm sorry, we're way off on a tangent now, but the natural decay of a law is that
You're welcome.
The natural decay, like inaction in politics, means more restriction because whatever laws are there stay there. If inaction were to cause more freedom, then that would be very nice, or potentially dangerous and cause you to maybe get off your butts and do your job. So in other words, every single law in the United States should decay. They should all wear out in 20 years max. And when they do wear out, you better put them back, or else murder is going to be legal and we're going to have another purge. So go do your job, or else something bad will happen. You can't just sit there and argue until you're blue in the face. You must do something.
Yeah. Let's move into some tougher stuff to talk about. Apparently there was a shootout in Jersey. 6 were killed, including 2 gunmen. It looks like there was a purposeful attack by multiple active killers. They attacked a Jewish deli or a kosher deli, I believe. And there was a bit of a shootout and 6 people died. It was kind of I am not hearing a whole lot about this. I did do a little bit more research just to kind of figure out what was exactly going on. I don't know a lot. Genevieve, did you hear about this?
I actually did not. The first that I heard about it was in your show notes.
Yeah, it was I kind of heard a little bit. They're not saying whether it was like a terrorist thing or whether but it's weird that multiple killers would attack a specific place with intent. And I didn't see a whole ton. I tried to do a little bit more research. Maybe it's just a little bit too new, or maybe it's like the Vegas thing where we're never going to find out anything about it.
The cynic in me says the less we know, the more likely it is that it's something that reinforces private ownership. But you can't know that for sure. It's just, boy, things seem to be on blast when they seem to be against your opinion. Yeah,
we do have the Pew Pew Jew watching, Yehuda Raymer, and he says it was an anti-Semitic attack. So, I mean, generally, I would think that's, I don't know.
I would say by the basis that's in a Jewish deli, that's a likely scenario, but then I don't know how many Jewish delis are in New Jersey. If there's just a lot of them, it could be. It's kind of like saying that all these shooters recently have played violent video games. So it's like every male under the age of 35 has played violent video games. So if every third thing is a Jewish deli, I mean, I would rather not speak out of turn about it. Oh, is there a ton of info? Good. Okay, good.
So Yehuda is saying it was targeted. There's a ton of info out. The stuff I was looking at, I couldn't I don't know.
It's not cursory. The problem is you can't make a call in these situations unless you go see people's sources.
Yeah. Kenny says that ATF was on the scene in a hurry. But yeah, 6 people dead. A couple of them a police officer and other police officers were injured. And it finished around 2 p.m. and dozens of bystanders pressed against police barriers to film the action on cell phones, some whooping when gunfire bursts filled the air.
What?
Yeah.
All I know is if this happens around you, or if you're in your town or anything like that, just take every piece of data you can get, make a backup of it, and then share it widely, and just let people sort it out. Because about 5 days after, you tend to know a lot more about what's going on. Except for like Vegas. Vegas is a complete mess, and nobody seems to know what happened there in very clear detail. So the more data you can get out there and leave it out there for everyone to see, the more people can start piecing it together, because it takes time and a lot of people looking at a situation to be sure of it. And since I haven't seen that collection, I really don't want to speak out of turn about this one.
Yeah. So Yehuda said he'll message me. I'll take the
compilation
to read that over as I go here and revisit as we go. Saudi Air Force soldier goes on terror attack in Pensacola, Florida. So there's this guy, he's over here from Saudi Arabia. He's part of a program where he's learning how to like fly and do security and things like that. The night before this, he had actually had a dinner party at his house, a watch party, where they watched videos on mass shootings. Authorities are looking for additional Saudi students that may have been involved in the terror attack. So there was multiple Saudis that were over here. Some of them are in custody, and it has not been said whether they are guilty of anything, but there are a couple of them that are missing. Victims of the Pensacola terror attack showed evidence of heroism. The killer bought the gun legally, which I do want to revisit in just a second. And the FBI warned of this loophole months ago. So I'm going to talk about that because this is This Week in Guns real quick. They keep mentioning this loophole, and what it is, I'm going to read it right here. Even the governor, Ron DeSantis of Florida, was not aware of this. He said that he always thought that foreign nationals, except for certain law enforcement, were not allowed to purchase firearms. But basically, if you get a hunting license that's been issued in the United States, immigrants in the U.S. can legally purchase a gun.
That's correct. Actually, when I worked for an FFL, I've sold guns that way. It's actually pretty common with Chinese hunters down here. People would come in to work for one of the big companies that's set up in our region, and they'd want to go out hunting, and they'd want to own a gun, which they would then resell almost exclusively to the shop that they bought it from whenever they went back. So not an uncommon thing.
Yeah. So they're calling it this loophole. The FBI, Breitbart reports that the FBI had warned of loophole allowing foreign nationals to buy gun. I hate it when they call these things loopholes. It's not a loophole. It's just the way that the law is written, because the people who write the laws don't actually understand the laws or even what they're talking about. But it says this loophole gives foreign nationals legal purchaser status if they simply obtain a hunting license. The FBI put out a warning on May 22nd, 2019, alerting gun dealers to the possibility that foreign nationals hostile to the U.S. might acquire guns via the hunting license exception. I don't know.
Exception, not loophole.
Exactly. Yeah, it's not an exception.
Like, it's the fucking law. It can't be a loophole.
It exists for a reason. Genevieve, I'm going to start with you here. Like, this whole thing, there's just so much to unpack. Like, this guy's over here. He's being trained. He has this dinner party where they watch just mass killing videos. Like, God, what a mess.
You've never been to a mass killing video party?
I have not. Genevieve, have you?
No, I have not, actually. I know, a big shocker there. No, but the whole situation is really sad. I mean, anytime that something like this happens, I feel just really saddened for the families who lost people who were innocent, and I also really hope that this doesn't turn into what we all know it inevitably is going to, which is we have to fix the loophole. We have to not allow foreigners traveling in the country to get hunting licenses, because then they're going to be able to purchase firearms. And this is a huge problem and blah, blah, blah. Everybody makes these tragedies into a political argument. And that's very sad, in my opinion. And I also think that regardless of whether a law is written well or not, whether there's a loophole or not, I don't think any of that even matters, because someone who wants to do harm and someone who has evil intentions is going to find a way to do it anyway. So whether they make new laws from this situation, whether they think that they're fixing old laws, it's not really going to change anything, in my opinion. Evil is going to be evil.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And I mean, let's think real quick. Like, why does this law exist? Well, I mean, Jeremy, you went over to Africa and you won a safari, like in a shooting competition. You went over there and you used firearms to kill animals. And I mean, like, that's why that exists here, right? So people from other countries can come to the United States and hunt legally.
Yeah, take that, you animals.
Right.
I now none of them can really take them anywhere. Like, I was talking to a guy in he's a Wyoming outfitter, and these like really rich Chinese businessmen will come buy guns, buy scopes, but then they can't take them home, so they just sell them back or give them back or just leave them sometimes because they can't take them back.
Somebody needs to make a discount website. That's all I'm hearing.
Right? Yeah. Like, I don't know. I guess they just resell them. Like, or here's a rental. Like, I don't know, but.
Yeah,
it's interesting.
I guess if you're over a lot, you could like buy it, put it in a locker, and then use it when you come back.
This is another one of those things that sort of exposes a contradiction between the left and the right, and may be another point for libertarians at some level. But this is a belief that if you are a foreign national, you still have all your human rights in the U.S. There's an argument fundamentally about whether or not the human rights in the U.S. are manifest to all human beings or manifest to United States citizens. And so you see applications of it that say, if you manage to make it across this border and you need medical help, then you get medical help, or you get this, you get all these services that are provided to people who are non-citizens. And usually the left side of our politics supports that. But then when it comes to rights like the Second Amendment, they're going to crack down on them, although perhaps not as hypocritically as you might think, because they also want to crack down on that for their own citizenry as well. But they'll certainly lean into that othered mentality. I think the bigger problem here is one of psychology and our relationship with other nations, perhaps. Like, there's become a wave of people that are interested in causing harm to the United States. There might be something to look into causes-wise there and insecurity there, but I don't know that it's going to apply to the individual tools as much as you might want it to.
Yeah, and I mean, I talk about this often. In New Zealand, like, one monster became the most powerful man in the country because he affected everybody with his deeds. And it's kind of the same thing here. Like, the governor of Florida said that Saudi Arabia is going to need to pay for this. And I'm like, what? I mean, maybe if it was state sanctioned and after an investigation you find that, but like, why should Saudi Arabia pay for one maniac, right?
Yeah,
like,
but if a drunk frat boy smashes up a bar in Greece, does the U.S. government pay for that? Like,
I mean, maybe, but then also on top of that, we're going to eliminate this exception, and now people from other countries can't come hunt in the U.S. Like, hunting is a grand thing in the United States. It pays for a lot of our wildlife department and natural resources and things like that. I mean, hunting is a fantastic part United States culture, and being able to extend that to people from other countries that want to come over and do that, and then to take that experience of the United States away because one person is a maniac, like that's the kind of stuff that just gets to me. I'm like, that's trying to sue Remington because someone used a firearm in a mass killing. It's kind of that same thing. Like, I don't know that we should get rid of this exception. Clearly, it is an issue. Maybe we figure out different ways to make sure that bad people aren't getting it, but like to just remove it. I wonder
if these idiots know that non-citizens actually live in the U.S.
Yeah,
like I've sold 2 guns in since I've had my store to non-U.S. citizens. Only 2 because I live in a small town. One was an Italian citizen, and the other one was a New Zealand citizen. But now both of them are resident aliens, so they have social security numbers and don't need the hunting license. So I mean that part doesn't apply. But they were foreign nationals, technically speaking. One of them's my cousin's husband, but
yeah.
Regardless of what nationality you are or where you're from, we can't start punishing the many for the acts of a few. That's when things start to get really dangerous, in my opinion.
Not only that, but there's solutions for these problems that are available if you extend individual liberty instead of suppressing it. So, personal ability to defend yourself, if that had been present, because these things always happen in soft areas. And I shouldn't say that. A lot of people say all these shootings happen in quote unquote gun-free zones. They don't. It's that the ones that happen in the not gun-free zones tend to get put down real fast. And I know that's really unpleasant to say, but it's a harsh reality that the number one indicator for violence is previous violence and almost nothing else. And so unless you know someone's committed a violent act, the first time they do anything is the only time you might get warning. And that stinks. I know we all want a way to prevent tragedy before it happens, but short of clairvoyance, there's no way to do that except to turn the entire country into Fisher Price.
Yeah, I completely agree. Moving on to the next one, a sailor kills 2 and himself at a Pearl Harbor shipyard. This is a guy who had been undergoing counseling, had expressed dissatisfaction with his commanders before Wednesday's shooting. He'd also faced non-judicial punishment, a lower-level administrative process for minor misconduct. Basically, he was armed for his duties while serving as a watchstander, and he just decided to open fire in a dry dock. Then things get a little weird. It says authorities said they were investigating why he was allowed to be armed while on duty, and then they say that he wasn't allowed to carry his own firearms. But clearly in the article somewhere else it says that he was armed as part of his duties. And I don't know, like just another crazy person. I wonder if there were, like you just mentioned, Othais, those precursor violence somewhere out there. But this happened, interestingly enough, kind of all in a row. And Genevieve, did you read about this one?
Only a little bit. I mean, from what you've said, it sounds like there's a lot of misinformation going around or contradicting information in that one article. And to reiterate what Othais said, violence is the best judge of violence. We shouldn't judge violence based on a mental health diagnosis or based on the fact that someone's in therapy or counseling. And I don't know enough about this situation to really comment on it. I don't know, like, was he on medications? Was he, in counseling because he had been violent towards people before? Like, we really don't have any information. My fear with this is that someone's going to see that he was in counseling and immediately just say, oh, crazy people shouldn't have guns.
Right. Or to even assume that just because you're in counseling, to make that leap to, oh, crazy person. Like,
right.
we were talking about this at the shop, and because we don't know what really happened. I mean, this guy's guarding a dock, right? Military. I mean, I was 18 years old. They handed me an M16 and a full magazine, and they said, if anybody crosses this line that's not the officer of the day or the armory sergeant, you shoot them. And I'm a kid. Who's to say he wasn't guarding something? Somebody walked around a corner. He got a little froggy, wasted a couple people he thought were threats, and then went, oh shit, and blew his brains out because he couldn't handle it.
It's tricky, but it does fit Hanlon's razor.
Yeah, that's true. Well, I guess we'll get this next one out of the way because it may take a while. FBI confirms 2 robbers and 2 innocent victims killed in police shootout with UPS truck carjackers. This is a mess. Talk about fracturing a community. So armed robbers hijacked a UPS truck after a robbery in Coral Gables, Florida, leading police cars on a harrowing chase up Interstate 75 that ended in a dramatic and deadly shootout on a busy street in Miramar. So they went to a jewelry place and they posed as Postal Service employees, and that's how they got in. I actually recently learned that jewelers and things, they actually have to use like armed shipping people, I believe, and like special, like they don't just, the FedEx guy just doesn't come there and then take that because there's so much money involved. And so they dressed as those people to get into this place, and then they hijacked a UPS truck.
Which is the most brilliant move, is to take a truck that is guaranteed to have GPS installed on it.
Oh yeah, yeah. So the UPS driver is in there with them. They're driving down the road. There's a big, huge police chase. Eventually, the UPS truck gets stuck in traffic, completely boxed in. Officers from multiple agencies descend on the truck. At some point, law enforcement begins firing at the truck. I still to this point don't know if the people in the truck fired first. They were armed. They did shoot at the jewelry place, and a ricochet hit one of the female employees of the jewelry place in the head and caused a minor injury. So they were armed at some point. Hundreds of rounds from multiple agencies were fired in. I'm not sure what SOPs cover this one. And the UPS driver, who by all accounts it was an innocent bystander in a car a little bit away from the UPS truck, and the 2 robbers have all now passed away. This caused extreme drama in every single thing. There's people that are like, well, what are the cops supposed to do? They're out here, they're doing a tough job. This is clearly chasing armed robbers and kidnappers. And, are they just supposed to let them go? And then other people are saying, well, they're hiding behind civilians' cars while there's shots ringing out. They're firing indiscriminately. And two innocent people died in addition to the 2 criminals. And oh my gosh. Yeah. Genevieve, I'm going to start with you because I know you're definitely interested in this one. Lay it down for us.
I'm furious about this situation. I saw the live stream when everything was happening, and then I actually saw footage from different angles that was taken by a drone as well. And you can see people in their cars, and the cops are hiding behind innocent civilians' cars, and you can see them. Like, there's one driver who's trying to get out of the car and trying to get his family out of the car, and the cop is just huddled there shooting right over his head. I mean, I've never seen anything like this in my life. And it blows my mind. And the people that I've talked to about it, there was a surprising amount of people who said, well, you have no idea how you'd react in that situation. Stress causes crazy things to happen, and your adrenaline and all of this fight or flight response. And it's like, I really don't think that in a situation where, and first of all, I'm not a police officer, I'm a civilian, but police officers are supposed to be trained to be able to handle these situations properly. And there was just a million things wrong with how this situation was handled. And the fact that 2 people who were innocent lost their lives at the hands of the people who we are supposed to trust to protect us really made me sad. And I think that it's also a really great argument as to why we can't solely rely on anybody else for our own protection. We have to rely on ourselves. No one's coming to save us. It's up to us, right? And I think people put way too much faith in authority. So I do hope that this inspires people to take action for themselves, take some classes, learn how to protect themselves and their family if they didn't already know how to do so. And I also hope that the county that this happened in really fixes their law enforcement department. This isn't the first time that particular area has had an incident where things were handled really poorly. So I would like to see something like this never happen again.
Jeremy, you mentioned something that I thought was pretty interesting. What are your thoughts here?
My whole breakdown of this was if I'm in that situation as myself right now or as a law enforcement officer, I don't give a shit about collateral damage. I'm going home. That's it. I don't care. Know your target and what is beyond it. That's all well and good till my target is shooting at me. And at that point, I'm smoking everybody. I'm going home. If I hit somebody behind that guy, I don't care. I don't care. Me and mine are going home. I don't know you. I probably don't like you. And I'm sorry that it happened. But I'm not going to feel bad about it because my family went home safe.
I believe what Jeremy is expressing is the difference between infantry and the polis, the man of the city, policeman. The problem is where people are upset with this situation stems from two things. He's absolutely right. It's the fourth rule of gun safety. Know your target and what's beyond it. If you haven't seen this situation, the way to imagine it is it's a four-way intersection with double or perhaps triple lanes going into each avenue. And all of them are backed up with cars. The UPS truck is being followed by the police officers so that when it stops at this interruption of traffic, that means that behind the UPS truck, for all that you can see in your panorama, is more regular civilians in their cars. So if you're an officer who's drawing, you must be aware that behind that truck is more innocent people and it's thin-skinned. So what that means is no matter what you do, when you fire, you are firing into a crowd of people. That's the part that everybody's very upset about, very obviously. What the police defense to this would be is sort of a combination of self-defense, which is that they are firing at the officers, and the argument for that is that the officers could remove themselves in the situation. It's a tracked vehicle. The other argument for this, and perhaps more compellingly than just the fact that they're officers defending themselves, is that sort of trolley car train track thing, where it's if you leave it as it is, it runs over 4 people. If you throw the switch, it runs over 1. And so their argument would be is that we must engage and risk hurting people, because if we don't, there's a higher risk that these criminals will hurt people because they're armed and they've shown that they're willing to hurt people. That sort of teeter-totter judgment is extremely difficult to make. And the one thing that you can't change about it is once you do take action, whatever the result does come down to a fault on your part. Whereas if you did not react, you were at most negligent. You're not necessarily causative. And so that's the problem. We have police who have caused a death in an attempt to avoid negligent actions causing deaths. And weighing those scales is extremely difficult.
It is. So I made some notes based on some of the things that I've read and some things that I would like us to kind of consider here and maybe talk about. So first off, I saw a lot of people criticizing this high-speed chase. Like, is this the world we live in where jewel robbers? And I will admit, I saw a comment that I thought was one of the dumbest things I've ever seen in my whole life. And it was
just one.
It stuck out to me, and I wish I could remember who did it so I could literally just send them a letter of how they might be one of the dumbest people I've ever met or seen on the entire planet. And maybe that's unfair, but they were talking about high-speed chases, and they were like, why do they need to chase them for this? They'll probably let the UPS guy go eventually. And I was like, well, do we live in a world where we let people do bad things and just hope that they let him go? I mean, he's clearly a witness to all this. Like, maybe they let him go, maybe they don't let him go. Maybe he dies in a hail of gunfire when the cops decide to open fire on the criminals. Maybe he doesn't, but I was like, I don't know. Like, do we just let things like this go? Because my next note was information overload in multiple agencies. We clearly know through many events in the United States that interagency communication is not great. And let's lay this down. We get report of shots fired at XYZ Jewelers. Cops are responding. The Broward County Sheriff Department, Miami-Dade Police Department, many different agencies were involved here. And there's probably not a whole lot of communication going through. So we've got multiple agencies responding. We've got kind of information overload. There was a lady who was hit by a ricochet or shrapnel at the jeweling place who was bleeding. So they're sending medical there. If you've ever listened to police scanners when something crazy is going on, and my most recent one was the Whiskey Warrior 556 thing. It's out of control, ridiculous, and it's impossible to come up with anything. They probably heard someone's been shot, ambulance, first responders responding, kidnapping, UPS truck. Like, they don't have all the information. And the dispatchers, it is impossible for them to get all of these dispersed agencies the proper information. So maybe letting them go and following them with choppers is the right thing. But because of the infrastructure that exists, I don't really think that that's a reasonable expectation here.
I want everybody chased all the time.
I kind of do too.
Do you know what happens in cities when they announce they have a no high speed pursuit policy? People just gun it.
Yeah. The other issue is, don't forget that this is a region that suffered from being accused for the past few years of lack of action on a previous shooting. Like, not necessarily this department, but that's on everybody's mind. And they used caution and they hesitated, and that cost a lot of lives. And so in this case, they did not hesitate for even a second, and that's cost a couple lives. So it's a pendulum, because training sort of emphasizes, it's always you're training for the last battle.
Every department in the country is going to watch that video as part of their training department now.
Right, and what's going to happen after this is there's going to be hesitation because of this, and somebody else is going to get. It's in the truth is sometimes you're trapped in situations where the answers are not necessarily right or wrong. It really is the cable car, so it's tricky.
I agree. So then I've taken some vehicle counter ambush courses, and one of the first things that happens if you're around vehicles is everyone collapses on vehicles. Like they call them bullet magnets for a reason. We crowd the cover, we get right inside there. Literally, you'll have an instructor be like, all right, so never crowd the vehicle. Don't run to the bullet magnet because rounds go through vehicles. And the first thing that happens when you start doing some scenarios and things like that is everyone collapses on the vehicle. And you do it over and over again. And everything inside your body, every survival instinct that you have is making you collapse on this vehicle. So Genevieve, you even brought it up, like hiding behind or using civilian vehicles as concealment and cover. God, it's awful, right? Like I totally agree. But also having done some of these courses, I'm like, I kind of understand that instinct, that survival instinct. And I mean, Jeremy said it. I'm not saying it's right. I am not saying it's right. I'm not saying right or wrong, good or bad here. I'm just trying to bring up some of these things that I've been thinking about. What is the SOP for this? Like multi agencies, multi jurisdictions, like they all probably have different SOPs for response to this. And then ultimately the cops are not responsible for the people that are died. Ultimately, these people, the criminals, are ultimately responsible. And I always try to keep responsibility where it lies. Mistakes were made after that, but had they not decided to do armed robberies of a jewelry place, none of this really happens. And man, the whole thing is awful. And there's going to be changes hopefully coming in Florida, because I think that
this tax is the limit, though, because what's happening is you say that, whoever starts the situation is responsible to a degree. How many responsive shooters and how many rounds of ammunition is an acceptable response to two robbers with one gun between them, or perhaps two guns? So it's tricky. You know what I mean? There is going to be an area at which you're not allowed to carpet bomb a neighborhood because there is a thief in that neighborhood. Like, yes, we blew up 7 houses, but one of them was hiding a fugitive. That's not going to work.
There was just such an incredible lack of organization with this entire situation. And I think a lot of that can be fixed with better training and more practice. And I've helped qualify police officers in their shooting requirements for a number of years. They come in like maybe once a month. I'm a competitive shooter. I'm not in any life or death scenarios every single day. And I train way more than that just to run around and shoot paper targets. So I think that people are also just very disappointed because this topic has been very divided in our community. You're either like against the cops nowadays, or you're stupid and don't know what you're talking about. So I think that being someone who was always trying to say, this isn't everybody, give people a chance. They're still human beings. Of course, there's going to be corrupt police officers, and there's going to be police officers who are good at their job and genuinely care about people. And then to see something like this come out was just a massive disappointment, because I really did put my faith in police officers, and I'm sure that there still are good ones out there. I just really think that people need to be responsible for their own personal safety, because there was so much wrong with this situation. And by Jeremy's standards, what he's saying is he doesn't care who dies as long as him and his family gets to go home. So, okay, by that logic, if I'm in a car and I'm a bystander, I'm shooting the cop who's right in front of me, shooting at me and my children, So there's really no right or wrong answer in this situation. It was just really disappointing to me to see something like that. And it's like, why didn't you, if you're going to shoot at this vehicle and you're not even trying to be in a position where you're trying to hit your target, why not use your own cars as concealment? I just don't understand the need to put innocent people in danger. And just watching people trying to open the doors to get out and move out of the way was just so heartbreaking. And it really, I don't know, it hit a weird place with me personally. I understand everybody's opinions here and what everyone's saying. Just, I think that, as a community, they need to be better than that. That's literally what they get paid to do. Let's train them better and make this right.
I don't know. If we walk this down, I can see how, okay, should they have chased them? Yes or no? There's some argument there. I think overall, probably yes. When someone has deadly force, do we respond with deadly force? I think the answer is yes. Is it know your target and what's beyond it to the exclusion of someone else getting shot or yourself getting shot? That's pretty tricky. So it all gets hammered down. We even talked about hiding behind civilian vehicles as being perhaps an automatic response and not necessarily realizing what you're doing. Okay, what is the sort of teachable moment here? And my intuition, and I am not involved in law enforcement, so I'm sure I'll get a lot of opinions back, and I would like them because it's something to consider, not something to declare as a fact. But I think the ultimate result of this, when I look at it, is I always wonder how many people open fire because the next person opened fire. And what I would like to know is how much training is, I don't care what the guy next to you does, acquire your target, assess it as a threat, and make your decision to pull the trigger and make sure that your bullets are on target. Because I think a lot of what happened is just crowd fire caught on, and everyone drew and everyone fired. And I see this all the time in police videos. I've even seen a woman with 5-inch long fingernails who somehow still had a gun and was on the force, who was firing all the way across an Eckerd's parking lot to try to hit a man 250 yards away, and her own partner is right next to him, and who knows who she's going to shoot in the back. And she's firing because they are firing. And I wonder how much of that sort of pack mentality kicks in, and is there training to prevent that, or should there be? Because that's probably the bigger question is there an advantage to that mentality of just trusting and firing? Or
there's almost training to do that. If you've ever fired on a military or police qualification line,
right,
you are almost trained to start firing when somebody starts firing, because
is there an advantage other than just is there an advantage other than just the faith that their call is?
No, it's not by design. It just happens.
Yeah.
Because you get ready on the left, ready on the right, ready on the firing line, ready, commence firing, and then there's a pause. And then you hear pop, 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 and then everybody's shooting. But there's always the first guy, and it's like nobody wants to be the first guy. It's really weird. I'm pretty sure that's what happened at Kent State.
Why do you think that happens, Jeremy? Is that a lack of training? Is it an emotional response? Why does that happen?
I think it's the same psychology behind the bystander effect, right? No one wants to be the odd man out. No one wants to be the individual.
I don't think that's it. I think it's the who's actually willing to shoot somebody.
Yeah, it's once
that guy shoots first, and then everybody follows suit.
There's also probably an element of collective guilt where it's just I don't want Tim to be the only one who put 2 rounds in the guy, and Tim is the only one that goes up for it. I'm here. I'm going to put 2 rounds on him too.
I don't think it's that at all. Really? I think it's somebody really wants to shoot. Somebody's going to be the first one to shoot, and that person is probably the guy that wants. Especially if everybody has the same presentation of the target. It's very different if one guy has a shot and nobody else does. But when everybody's got a shot, the first guy to pull the trigger is going to be the guy that really cares the least about taking a human life. Then everybody else goes.
Or perhaps the first to see a threat. which is also valid. But again, do you want everybody shooting if they haven't perceived the same threat? And I can't imagine from what we've seen of that shooting that all of those officers saw the threat being presented clearly, and all of them clearly placed their group within a even 2-man sized target. You know what I mean? I don't think most of them were shooting within a minute of man at that range, and I don't think they knew exactly what they were shooting at in order to cause this damage.
Oh, 20-30% of them had their eyes closed.
Probably.
Yeah.
And we're just pulling the trigger out of sheer panic.
So, Matthias, you brought up my last point, which was the sympathetic shooting. Not too long ago on this show, This Week in Guns, we talked about Salt Lake City. There was a high-speed chase. The perp crashed his truck into the front of a storefront. All the officers converged and literally unleashed absolute hell. Perpetrator died. Nobody in the business died. Basically, all the rounds went inside the business.
Oh yes, I remember this one.
Yeah, and we hailed them in the gun community. We hailed them as like, wow, Salt Lake City don't mess around. This is the exact same scenario. There's just cars on the other side of that UPS truck here, and it's the exact same thing. So we're fine with it in Salt Lake City when no one accidentally died, but in Florida, the exact same scenario. Innocent people did die, and I mean, I'm not saying that like that's a wrong thing to think. Like clearly, innocent people died. Something is bad, and we need to put things in place so that doesn't happen. But we also need to be intellectually honest with ourselves. Like if we praise the Salt Lake City because they burnt stuff down, then I mean it's kind of the exact same thing here. But yeah, the whole situation was awful, and yeah, innocent people died, and it really, really stinks. I think all the way around. I think we've covered that one. I do want to cover one more story. I know we're running a little bit long, but first person charged under Florida red flag law found guilty. There's a lot to unpack here. So there's this guy, Jaron Smith, 33 years old. He's facing up to 5 years in prison after a jury in Broward County rejected his argument that he did not fully understand the new law. But basically, so this guy is out. He's in the street shooting at his best friend who's driving away in a car. At some point,
wait, this was his best friend he's shooting at?
Yeah, he's shooting at his best friend who's driving away in a vehicle.
I don't think they're best friends anymore, dude.
Maybe not. I mean, I don't know. I'd shoot at Jeremy and we'd
good old goodbye shoot.
Yeah. Yeah. So
as long as you only wing me, I won't hold it too much against you.
Exactly.
They were having a harmless 22 LR fight. They wore long sleeves. It was fine.
Everything's still
I got safety glasses.
I got some goggles from the lab and a long sleeve shirt. We're fine. Let's have a 22 short fight.
So he's facing trial on an attempted murder charge, but they basically used some version of their Florida's red flag law to allow authorities to obtain a court order to confiscate his 2 firearms, AR-15 and a 22 caliber rifle. And Genevieve, I don't understand how the heck this is even a red flag thing. I'm like, this dude's like shooting in the street at his friend who is driving away in a car, clearly angry. Like, how is this a red flag? How is this? Now he's been prosecuted and charged under this red flag law when really it's attempted murder. And I think that's, you arrest him and then you confiscate like the things because there's probable cause and due process in all of this. How is this red flag?
So it's interesting. We were talking before and I said the same thing. I was like, I don't understand how this is filed under a red flag law. Why is this red flag? And, you know, thinking about it again now, I'm going to say, makes sense. This is a red flag law because since the day that any of this started to get talked about, red flag law, I always said red flag laws do not care at all whatsoever about your mental health. These laws are being passed so that people can more easily confiscate firearms. And that is exactly what happened in this situation.
Yeah, I guess that is true. I mean, he wasn't convicted of anything. He's just been he's facing trial. And
I think arguably, and I don't know the Florida system. Actually, I know a Florida attorney. I should probably be calling him right now as a phone a friend. But reasonably, there might be somebody saying, well, look, okay, he gets charged. He goes in, innocent until proven guilty. He bails out. He goes home and his guns are still there. This man is dangerous and is now allowed to have his guns. But that's a different animal from what we hear as a red flag law, which is that we will just go ahead and call you dangerous and take them. Whereas, if you tell me you're named as a defendant in a violence case, I want a quote unquote red flag for that. That's something that you could have a conversation about, but that's not the application here. So I don't know. It's very bizarre. Like it makes you understand the sympathy for wanting to be able to seize weapons, specifically when someone is already being arrested and charged for a violent act. There's my sympathy. If you're charging someone for a violent act but have not convicted them, okay, I see where your problem might be. But this is a weird case to build up on. You know what I mean? Like, this is just, it feels like you could just charge him for the crime that he committed and not have to go through all this other stuff. But what do I know? Like, to me, it's also been always alarming, and this is a bigger issue, is if someone's so dangerous that we can't let them have a gun, why am I forced to go to Walmart with them? Like, if they're that dangerous, what are they doing on the street, unlabeled,
Yeah, I don't know. It is a weird one. I'm not going to lie. Like, it had me going back and forth a lot. I'm like, okay, so this guy's in the street shooting at his neighbor, but maybe it was justified. Maybe that guy is like our friend Aaron. Maybe he had it coming. I don't know.
Does it say when this happened? I also feel like from reading the article, there's, again, not a lot of information that's being released on what actually went down.
March 2018, 1 month after the red flag laws went into effect.
Okay. So it was a while ago. So then you would think that you'd be able to find more stuff on it, but
yeah. And
when did the seizure happen back then?
Yeah. They seized his firearms after his arrest in March 2018, and they did a red flag. The more I think about it, the more I'm like, man, like, he hasn't been convicted of anything. He's been charged with it, innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. Maybe this is bad.
It's bizarre to me because, as far as I understand it, you're not supposed to release someone who's potentially that dangerous.
right.
So if you're, again, this has been the fundamental problem I've had with red flag from the beginning, isn't even other than the human rights angle of it, but it's just like, wait a second. He's not. You can't. We can't let this guy have a single gun. No, he's not allowed to have a single gun. He might kill someone. How much does that truck weigh? Like, what do you do? Like, he has his license. Even if he doesn't have a license, he has access to car keys. Like, what?
He can buy cutlery.
Yeah. Like, what are we doing? Like, is he dangerous or isn't he? And if
They're
he
just confiscation laws. They don't care about any of that. They
Right.
just want to take guns out of the hands of people who may or may not be innocent.
Yeah. If I'm going to kill a lot of people, guns are not the best way to do it.
It's also bizarre because your privacy is so poorly respected. But then if you're actually like a dangerous felon, who's either served his time but you're still not allowed to own anything or whatever else the case may be, you're not really on a list that everybody can access unless it's like sexual predator thing. But then since you have all this privacy, what happens is every innocent person must go through this background check and do all this crazy stuff because they might maybe be you. Well, why don't we brand you? Like, how do we put it on those guys that did the wrong thing instead of constantly sort of foisting it off on everybody that hasn't done anything wrong, which is the broad majority of people?
Cut off their hand. If they're really violent, both hands.
Scarlet letter. We're just going to put like
That's what I was going to say.
like an eye on their forehead for idiot.
So I guess I got to be like, you know what? In this case, like, innocent until proven guilty. Like, he did this thing. Even his neighbor, a neighbor said he's an Army veteran. He spent a lot of money for his weaponry. It's crazy. You just got to live around here to know what's going on. I got to err on the side of freedom. I got to say that, yeah, he shouldn't have had his firearms confiscated if he hadn't been convicted of a crime. Like,
well,
Right.
if he was dangerous enough not to be able to have those guns, please don't release him into the neighborhood to begin with.
Yeah, just take him out back and put a 32 in the back of his head.
Well, I would say hold him until you can give him a speedy trial, but that's gone out the window too.
right. It absolutely has, because we're talking about this in 2019 and it happened almost 2 years ago.
So, well, we got to let him out on bail because he can't sit around for 6 years. Well, wait a second. Why is he sitting around for 6 years waiting for a trial?
Yeah. I don't know. And I will say, the second paragraph, he now faces up to 5 years in prison after a jury rejected his argument that he didn't fully understand the new law, and they returned that verdict Friday after a short trial.
Wait, what law is he guilty of? Like, what's he convicted on?
Found guilty over his refusal to voluntarily surrender the weapons.
Oh, well, on that point, he's correct. Like, that's the weird part. Like, he can still be a criminal piece of crap and be right about one thing. I mean, there's plenty of reasons that he should not have those firearms, it sounds like, that are already enshrined in our law. Why did they have to use this method? And it sounds like they're just trying to hit him for another charge, is what it really is.
Yeah, I agree. All right. That will do for the stories, man. Really good conversation. I appreciate you guys very, very, very much. Genevieve, what have you been up to, and where can people find you online?
Sure. So primarily what I've been doing is just starting Hold My Guns, which is a nonprofit for voluntary and temporary firearms storage if you're going through a hard time. You can find more info at holdmyguns.org. We're on Instagram, holdmyguns.org. Also Beyond the Unknown, which is my personal Instagram where I talk about mental health and show off cool guns and, what I do working at the Gun Collective. So lots of fun stuff. Been super, super busy. My dog Felix just turned 9 months old. He's fantastic. So
He's so cute.
He is the most handsome boy. I really can't complain. I got lucky.
Yeah, he is awesome. I need to have you on We Like Shooting to talk more about Hold My Guns. I think it's very interesting.
Sure.
Yeah, well, I'll get that scheduled later. But yeah, that is awesome stuff. Thank you so much for all your hard work out there, and thanks for being on here. Like, sometimes we talk about stuff that's hard, and like it's tough to have differing viewpoints about stuff. And I appreciate so much that you're not afraid to kind of speak up and like really share that stuff.
Thank you so much. I love talking to all of you guys. It's always such a good time whenever you ask me to be on. So
it's so funny. Just a few minutes ago, I was thinking like, I'm the luckiest dude like ever. Like I get to talk to all these really smart people, and I get to kind of listen to all the different things that everyone says and really take that when I build my own opinions. And I feel really lucky about that. Othais, what have you been up to? Where can people find you?
I'm just working. You guys know where it's at. See an Arsenal. Look up your old World War I guns for now. Although coming into 2020, we're hoping to do a shotgun series that'll hopefully ruin in yet another market. But get in your old shotguns while you can, folks. I'm gonna start talking about them, and they're gonna go up. But you know where to find me, guys. It's the same old history show.
It's CANDRSENAL, right?
Yeah.
C and Arsenal.
Or look for Othais. It's fine.
Or Primer.
Yeah, that's true. Or Fat Ian.
My best of the ladies and the pups. Jeremy Posderick, where can people find you?
Please don't. I'll shoot at you if you find me.
It's true. It's true. Rivers Edge Tactical in Valley City, Ohio, or the We Like Shooting Show, or Double Tap, or Gunflix and Chill, all on the Firearms Radio Network. My name's Sean Heron, and I want you to go check out firearmsradio.tv/SCD, but also the Patriot Patch Company. And don't forget that this show is produced it is produced by Kenny Ortega and Ben Allreed, and it's a production of the Firearms Radio Network. And we will catch all of you guys next week. Oh, everything's slow right now. Here we go.
Jeremy, I just